equips and empowers you to have uncomfortable conversations on hot topics with people who don't share your same beliefs. Your host, Pete Berardi, Aaron Bear, Ricky Burney, and Brandy Taylor. Now let's get ready to have that conversation. Uncomfortable Conversations is powered by the Trendsetter Mentor Group, an exclusive membership for mentorship on Facebook.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Uncomfortable Conversations. My name is Brandy Taylor, and my co-host is Aaron Bear. She's the author of the book Beaten to Badass, which I actually have right here. I'm about halfway through it, and I wanted to share with you guys one of my very favorite quotes that I've read out of her book so far. And I want to talk a little bit about it and show how it can tell us what type of person she is and what type of host she will be on this show. She speaks about them recycling aluminum cans, and when they have enough money, they bought 3 trees. They planted one for her and one for each of her sisters. Her mom and her sister. Her mom and her sister neglected their plants. They didn't, help them thrive. They didn't speak to them. They didn't water them. They didn't take proper care of them, and they didn't nurture them. And that was something that Erin did with her trees, and her tree was the only one that thrived. And so I think that this is very important because it shows us how humans also thrive. And we need that nurturing, and we need that caring, and we need people to ultimately show us that they care about us. And sometimes that's by having these type of uncomfortable conversations. So I just wanted to say that part and introduce her as one of our permanent hosts on the show and give her a warm welcome. So, Erin, how are you?
I muted myself on accident. Hey, everybody. Good morning. I am Aaron Bear. I am so thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for the wonderful words, and welcome, Brandy. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us on Uncomfortable Conversations this morning. Our mission each week is to encourage, equip, and empower our listeners to embrace uncomfortable conversations on topics that matter to you without our bias or judgment with people that may not share your core beliefs. Brandy and I have the opportunity each week to have these uncomfortable conversations with our co-host, Sabrina Prodick. She's the author of Growing Ageless. Man, I hope to do that. Think Young and Live Younger, along with our other co-host, Ricky Burney, success coach and author of the book Destined for Greatness, 90 Days of Transformational Affirmation. We call them our conversation coaches. Good morning, Ricky. How was your weekend? And please introduce our guest.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, Aaron, thank you for that amazing introduction. My weekend was pretty good, actually, pretty good. It had some pitfalls, but overall it had lots of progress that I'm excited about sharing sometime later in the future. But our special guest for today is none other than Pamela L. McCoy. She is the author of the book Bonafide Bits, where inspiration and intellect collide with your finance. Pamela is the CEO of Bonafide Credit Consultants, LLC, the first choice for organizations seeking to provide the benefit of financial capability education with personal money management to your team. Their seminars and tools are structured to share valuable credit, money management information, and resourceful tools that can be used to improve and secure both your financial future and your physical health. So I'm sure she's going to give us some amazing tips, and I look forward to hearing more about her book and her company. Welcome to the team, Pam.
Thank you. Good morning, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, Pamela, we'd like to talk a little bit about you. So on your website, it states that your company, Bonafide Credit Consultants, LLC, provides real solutions towards credit education. Our financial literacy tools equip organizations, individuals, and community members with the knowledge necessary to make a fiscal improvement, which helps to develop a healthier, more vibrant, stress-free lives. Bonafide credit education sessions are designed to provide an in-depth understanding of financial risk, as well as resources and practical application of improved financial literacy. Pamela, let's chat for a minute. Who would be your number one customer?
In a general nutshell, it would be anyone who has a made up mind that they're ready to put in the work that will be required to shift where they're currently at. And so really it is anyone. It's an individual, it's an organization that has made up their mind that they want to pour into whoever their constituents are. It is for the individual, as well as, I like to say, that generational transfer. So it doesn't matter what age it is, when you get the knowledge. When I say that the seminars are set up and designed for the participants to get it. And it doesn't matter the age. If you're 50, if you get it, all that means is that your time horizon to benefit from that knowledge is shorter than if you've gotten it at 20. So I still need you to get it, because if you then get it and then you take that knowledge home and you tell your children and your grandchildren, then generationally that knowledge is impacting your family as a whole. And so it's really important that you get it.
I like that, because it's a mindset. So nobody can put you in front of you. They have to be willing themselves to do it. So you can't recommend somebody. They got to be willing to do it. They have to participate themselves.
Absolutely. What I say is, in working with me, the outcome is going to be an action plan. And that's 2 words and 2 things. I, with my experience, will create the plan. You, the recipient, has to apply the action to my plan, or otherwise my plan is just words on a piece of paper and have 0 value. So that's what I mean when I say you have to have a made up mind that you're willing and ready to put in the work. You cannot, what's that definition of insanity? To keep doing the same thing, hoping that you're going to get different results. What got you where you are seeking the help means that there's going to need to be some changes to move you from that place. And I can't make you do anything. You have to decide. And as I say, with this as well as in life in general, I strongly recommend that you have a why, because it's not going to be easy. You didn't get in the credit situation or what have you overnight, so you're not going to get out of it overnight. You got to be willing to put in the work.
Words from an expert, and you heard that. So Pamela, tell us, what inspired you to write your book, Bonafide Bits, and how does the book empower the readers?
Well, it's a crazy story. I have been told, oh, you should write a book, and I had plans and kind of thought about writing a book. But the impetus to get it done when it got done was actually that I was asked to be a keynote speaker at a women's conference in Atlanta. And of course, with that came a vendor table and all of that. And I was like, how can I be the keynote at a vendor table and have nothing to sell? And so that was kind of the impetus to put me on that fast track to go ahead and write a book and all of that. And the book is a quick, easy read. It's designed intentionally to be that. It's 69 pages. It has, it's broken down into 5 categories, and I call them categories instead of chapters, because the categories are based on the motto of my company, which is to educate, to empower, to evolve, to enlighten, and to enrich. I like to say, if you get the book, you'll see in the front there's a fist, and it's not a power fist. What it is, biblically speaking, when your hand is closed, you cannot receive a blessing. So is true with your finances. And so when you apply the principles of my company, which are to educate, empower, evolve, enlighten, and enrich, what you find is that your financial freedom is right there in the palm of your hand. But you got to be willing to put in the work, right? And in the book, you'll see in one of the sections, it'll say that success only comes before work in the dictionary, right? And that is no truer statement. You got to be willing to put in the work. And so the book is broken down into those 5 categories. It will give you an inspiration, and that inspiration could be a quote. It could be something profound that someone said. It might even be a scripture. It'll give you that inspiration. It will then give you a life application of that inspiration, and then a financial application of that inspiration.
Pamela, with this business knowledge that you're sharing, this really should be in schools. So what is your vision to get this book and this knowledge into public education?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. I'm actually an approved vendor for Hillsborough County, and I've had some opportunities to do some financial, and I call it financial capability education as opposed to financial literacy. And it really, for me, the reason I do that is because it is my belief that everyone has some level of knowledge as it relates to personal finance, right? If you went to the Dollar Tree and you purchased something, you could be 5 years old and doing, so you have some working knowledge of personal money management. And so it is our goal to come alongside you to build upon where you're at, meeting you where you're at and building you there. And that's why I refer to it as financial capability education as opposed to financial literacy. And so any opportunity that I have to get before people, and particularly again, when I'm talking about that generational transfer, our children are our future. And so it doesn't matter where the parents lie in that, but unfortunately you can't teach what you don't know. And so if generationally all you have transferred is debt and bad financial behavior, then that is passed down. And so my goal is to break that cycle.
Well, you recently have added another dimension to what you're doing, and it's helping young girls with their confidence and self-esteem. Can you share your special box with helping them?
I will. The box is called the new arm, the new division that Sabrina is speaking of is called B5 Reaffirm. And so on the bona fide side, we focus on, again, the financial capability education. On the B5 Reaffirm side, we're focusing on mental health as relates to self-esteem. And so I've designed a box. You can see here, it's called the B5 Reaffirmation Box. And in this box, it's all about behavioral modification through repetition. And so it is that I am a B5. So inside of the box, it has a little heart that says, I am a B5. And what is the B5? I'm glad you asked. It is a bona fide boss with brains, beauty, and a believer in me. And that is the mission of the box, to really empower these girls to know that and really feel that deep inside, that they know that they know that they know that they are a bona fide boss. They have brains, they have beauty, and that they believe in themselves. Because although it's nice to have a cheerleading squad and others believing in you, the most important opinion is the opinion that they have of themselves. And the underlying sub mantra of the B5 reaffirmation boxes is that I'm me, right? And I'm me is not only a statement, but is an acronym. And the acronym is to improve my mental esteem. And that's the journey that these girls, that we as people, females, males, young or old, are on, is to improve their mental esteem. And it's not a destination, it's a journey, meaning that we're never going to get there. It's a work in progress and ongoing.
Pamela, thank you so much for investing your time with us today, especially early this morning. Each week, our conversation coaches chooses a topic that's trending that affects each of us in one way or another. Last week, we talked about domestic violence, and co-host Erin Bear shared notes from her book, From Beaten to Badass, her personal journey with domestic violence. This week, Uncomfortable Conversation was inspired by the announcement of the Kentucky grand jury that no charges against Louisville police for the killing of Breonna Taylor during a drug raid gone wrong, with prosecutors saying that the two officers who fired their weapons at the Black woman were justified in using deadly force to protect themselves after they were shot at. Brandy Taylor, can you lean in?
Yes. If this were one event of use of deadly force, then, we could consider this the police officers protecting themselves. Most Americans would then move on with their lives. Nevertheless, these events are becoming more and more common around the country and the world. We have decided to lean in on this uncomfortable conversation and ask our co-hosts, when is it legal to use deadly force? Each of our hosts will share their research and perspectives on this judgment and encourage others to do the same and listen to each other's perspectives without debate and stereotype. Alan, will you please share the video?
And now to Louisville, Kentucky, where for the first time we are hearing from one of the officers involved in the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor. In an email, the officer writes about that night and his thoughts on the protests that followed. This as the city is under a state of emergency ahead of a decision on whether some of those officers will be charged. Alex Perez is in Louisville with the latest.
Overnight, protesters in downtown Louisville marching past barricades and boarded up businesses. The mayor declaring a state of emergency as the city braces for a decision on possible criminal charges against the officers involved in the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor.
My hope is that we will continue to see peaceful, lawful protests.
One of the officers involved for the first time speaking out, Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly, who was shot in the leg during the botched raid at Taylor's home in March, sending an email to over 1,000 LMPD personnel early Tuesday morning. In the email obtained by ABC affiliate WHAS, Mattingly telling his fellow officers, "You do not deserve to be in this position, the position that allows thugs to get in your face and yell, curse, and degrade you, throw bricks, bottles, and urine on you and expect you to do nothing." Mattingly also writing, "I know we did the legal, moral, and ethical thing that night. It's sad how the good guys are demonized and criminals are canonized." His attorney defending the email, saying he was expressing his support for his police colleagues. Activist Tamika Mallory, who has led a massive social media campaign for charges against the officers, also on the ground here preparing for a decision.
If you don't have a situation where there are charges brought against those cops, then you don't start the process, the real process towards justice for Breonna Taylor.
And Alex Perez joins me now from Louisville. Alex, good morning. There are already some protests there we're hearing. What's the tone like?
Yeah, Diane, I want you to take a look behind me here. First of all, you can see all of these boarded up buildings here. This is what a lot of the businesses look like. There are barricades so to some areas you have to get there by foot. That's the only way in. No vehicle traffic is allowed. And yes, there are some protests. There in fact have been a protest here in Louisville since March, back when Breonna Taylor was killed. The majority of those protests have been peaceful, and that's what we have seen the last couple of days here. Dozens of people gathering, probably more than 100 of them last night. But the protests have been peaceful, the marches have been peaceful, and authorities are hoping that is going to continue when we learn of a decision. But of course, they're preparing for anything. Diane?
And Alex, any sense of when those potential charges or the decision not to charge will be announced?
Yeah, that is the big question right now, Diane. And we have talked to Breonna's family. We have talked to city officials, and everyone seems to tell us the exact same thing, that they do not know when exactly that decision is going to come down. The Attorney General is going to announce that decision once a grand jury reaches a decision, but the grand jury is operating on its own timetable. They are entitled to digest evidence, to talk about what they are hearing. So they're going to say they are ready when they are, and we just don't know when that's going to be just yet, Diane.
Well, we will continue to wait as patiently as possible. Alex Perez in Louisville for us. Thanks, Alex.
Welcome back to Uncomfortable Conversations. Our topic for today is, when is it legal to use deadly force? We are having this uncomfortable conversation with our co-host, Brandy Taylor, to shine a light on the importance of doing our homework before having these uncomfortable conversations. Cornell Law Legal Information Institute website stated the 5 legal reasons police officers can legally use deadly force, which means that force a reasonable person would consider likely to cause death or serious bodily harm. Its use may be justified only under conditions of extreme necessity, when all lesser means have failed or cannot reasonably be employed. A protective force officer is authorized to use deadly force only when one or more of the following circumstances exist. The first one is self-defense. When deadly force reasonably appears to be necessary to protect a protective force officer who reasonably believes himself or herself to be an immediate danger of death or a serious bodily harm. The next one is serious offenses against persons. When deadly force reasonably appears to be necessary to prevent the commission of a serious offense against a person or persons in circumstances presenting an immediate danger of death or serious bodily harm, such as sabotage of an occupied facility by explosives. Nuclear weapons or nuclear explosive devices is the next one, and that's when deadly force reasonably appears to be necessary to prevent the theft, sabotage, or unauthorized control of a nuclear weapon or nuclear explosive device. Special nuclear material, when deadly force reasonably appears to be necessary to prevent the theft, sabotage, or unauthorized control of special nuclear material from an area of a fixed site or from a shipment where category 2 or greater quantities are known or reasonably believed to be present. And the last one is apprehension, when deadly force reasonably appears to be necessary to apprehend or prevent the escape of a person's reasonably believed to, 1, have committed an offense of the nature specified paragraphs in A, 1 through 4 of this section, which I just read above, or 2, be escaping by use of a weapon or explosive, or who otherwise indicates that he or she possesses a significant threat of death or a serious bodily harm to the protective force officer or others unless apprehended without delay. And I'm going to ask a question, but first I want to stress that legality doesn't necessarily equal morality. So Ricky, from your perspective, do you think the decision was legal?
Well, that was actually where I kind of wanted to take that, because I'm not an attorney, I'm not a litigator, so I can't necessarily talk about the legal aspect, but what I can say as a human being, that this is the moral, and I believe that it's wrong, because overall this entire situation is involving wrongdoing, no matter what you say. There's a lot of judgment coming on Breonna Taylor's character. There's a lot of judgment coming on her boyfriend's character. And to me, what I hear is, I hear from everyone, from the police officers, there's a lot of grace given on human error for them. But in the case of her boyfriend, human error is seen as what has happened. Now, just picture yourself in that scenario. Someone's knocking at your door at 12 o'clock at night. You don't know who that person is. You don't have any reason to believe that someone should be knocking on your door. What do you think? Something's wrong. So of course you're going to get your gun. You keep hearing someone knock on the door and you say, who is it? And you don't hear someone. What are you going to do? You're going to go into defense mode. So when you see that someone's trying to come into your place, what are you going to do? You're going to protect yourself. And the fact that a person's history and a person's background is being taken into account instead of the facts at hand, to me, is a disservice and a dishonor to human life. How do we get to the point where we stop looking at people's past behavior and look at the current state and stop placing judgment and thinking that we can determine if a person should live or die? That to me is what's most important. Learning how to separate a person's past and looking at the current scenario and realizing that every person's life has value. Breonna Taylor's life had value. And the way that that was handled and the way that some people are absolving themselves of blame and responsibility speaks volumes of what they really thought about her life. So that's what I feel about it.
Thank you, Ricky. Sabrina, do you have any thoughts on this?
I do. So I'm removing myself from the after comments, and I'm going directly at what happened that night. And there was perception. There was a door between the police and the boyfriend. And so perception comes into play. And his perception was danger. Their perception was danger. And there was a reaction. And what happened that night, shots fired, life lost, at that very moment had nothing to do with his past and who he was and who she was. We're just playing all that out for a certain outcome. But what happened that night was perception. I tell you, fear in the mind can do a lot of crazy things. I've seen people go crazy because they invented stories in their head and they thought a certain thing was happening. And you're in the same room with them and you don't see that imminent danger. You don't see that same thing happening. So there was a perception that happened that night, had nothing to do with people's past. So the comments on the police officer, they felt like they were in imminent danger. He felt like he was in imminent danger and they both reacted. That's no excuse for loss of life. That's no excuse for the flagrant loss of life. And in my opinion, when things like that happen, I'd like to see a little bit more ownership on the part of the police officers when they do react in a negative outcome, such as loss of life. And I think we'd be able to, as a society, we'd be able to digest this if their reactions were more responsible. And I think we'd be able to handle the situation a little bit better. But for some reason, there seems to be a problem with them admitting that they failed or they were at fault. So that's my opinion.
I have to agree with both of you, Ricky and Sabrina, because, you know, like I said before, I posed the question, legality does not necessarily equal morality or what is right and wrong. And we need to look at the entire picture. There's obviously three stories to this situation. It's Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend's perspective. It's the police perspective, and then what truly went down. And I think, you know, stop worrying about putting blame on others and really take responsibility for the things that maybe you did that weren't justified, and try not to, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's moral. So when we come back from our sponsor break, Brandy will share the statistics from the Pew Research Center website on race relations between law enforcement and Black people. Our conversation coaches, Ricky and Sabrina, will lean in on this uncomfortable conversation. See you in just a moment.
Uncomfortable Conversations Talk Radio is sponsored by the Trendsetter Mentor Group, an exclusive membership for mentorship. You can follow all our hosts on Facebook. Search Trendsetter Mentor Group and join. Now back to the show.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Uncomfortable Conversation Morning Show. Today's topic is, when is it legal for police to use deadly force? And we have shared the legal reason. Now we are going to have a conversation on the social, ethical, and moral perspective of using deadly force. In a 2019 Center survey, 84% of Black adults said that in dealing with police, Blacks are generally treated less fairly than whites. 63% of whites said the same. Similarly, 87% of Blacks and 61% of whites said the U.S. criminal justice system treats Black people less fairly. Do you think the statistics lead to the reason why police officers escalate and use deadly force more commonly among Black people? Sabrina, let's get your thoughts.
Well, I will tell you, when I was in second grade and schools had just integrated, and I was going to what was a predominantly white school. So remember, I think it was fifth grade. I take that back. I'm on the playground playing with these little, white kids. And one girl says, my dad said, I can't be friends with you. And I said, well, why? Because I'd never had anybody tell me that. Well, because they told us you carry knives and guns. And here's a fifth grader saying that to me. What's a knife and a gun, by the way? I don't even know. So that perception was taught early to this child. A certain fear factor was taught early. And so, yes, we have our feelings about the police, but really, is it really just the police? Or is it the society? And is it are we passing down tradition to our kids to feel a certain way? And now we see these polls, 87%, 31%. But really, it's a culture, and it's a need for a cultural shift. And I think it starts there. Let's move it beyond the police department. We can see that in the protests and things that's going on in the world today. So I think there's concern. I think these percentages are legitimate in the way that people feel, but I think it moves beyond the police department.
Yeah, I actually agree with that, Sabrina. I believe that the fear is definitely a part of that. I don't think the statistic is the reason per se. I think it's actually the consequence of Blacks unfortunately going through that. I can even speak from my own experience of coming home from work, driving a little bit faster than I should have. I can be accountable for my actions, driving a little bit faster than I should have after coming home from 2 jobs and being pulled over. Cop came by, wasn't doing anything that was aggressive or resisting or anything. But as the cop was coming, it was late at night and they couldn't see my hands. So I could hear the shakiness in her voice. I could tell she was uncomfortable. I could tell she was slightly apprehensive as far as coming closer to the car. And she just yelled, "Put your hands on the steering wheel, put your hands on the steering wheel." I'm a dark-skinned Black man. My hands were on the steering wheel, but because it was dark, she couldn't see them. But her perception was that I wasn't complying because she couldn't see my hands. In that moment, she could have decided to shoot me because her fear was taking over her. Now, that fear for some people might be justifiable because of their limited experiences with people that look like me. But at what point do we start to realize that this could be problematic and can go against what the law enforcement is made to do, which is to serve and protect? So I do believe that this statistic is a consequence and is a symptom of whites or people in general having unfavorable experiences with Black people and not knowing necessarily how to properly interact with us. So that's what I kind of see with that statistic.
So it's obvious I am a white woman, so I do not understand how you guys feel and how you live in fear every day. And I have to apologize that it's just not okay. I have to say it again, legality does not necessarily equal morality. And this type of argument is part of the problem, not the legality part, but the question that was asked is that it's part of the problem because, of course, statistics do not equal causes or justifications. The statistics are results of policies and racist policies. If anyone wants to use statistics to justify racism or racist policies, then that speaks, guess what? That they're racist. And that's just not okay. It's not okay that Blacks have to, live in fear because they get pulled over and you might be a dark-skinned man or woman and they can't see your hands and their fear overtakes the moral thing to do and do it the right way and the procedures that they've been taught and trained to do. What about you, Pamela? What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with a lot that's been said by Sabrina and Ricky. My thought, too, is this whole legal morale kind of differentiator. But implicit bias, I think that is the key point, the underlying. We've got to acknowledge that it exists and address that, because all the training in the world of when you pull your gun, when you shoot your gun, all of that, that's just training, right? But your mental state is the deciding factor of when you actually do these things, or will you implement the training that you've had in this situation. And so I think until we kind of delve down into this mental kind of aspect of being in law enforcement, I have a friend of mine who lives in another state, and he put together, we were like his little demo, and he hasn't launched it yet because he's trying to figure out, really where it would lie. But it was so powerful. He is an African-American male. He's been in law enforcement for over 30 years or what have you. And so the context of what he put together was from those aspects, that he has been a Black man for like 50 years, and in law enforcement for 30. And so he can see and weigh in on both sides equally, and removing all of who should I be siding with. It's not about that. It's right down the middle, right and wrong, left and right. And it was so enlightening to hear it from that perspective of how about sometimes law enforcement, like anyone else, you make mistakes and there's consequences to those mistakes. You could be driving down the road, have an accident, vehicular homicide, or what, you're charged with that. Like, you don't get to say, oh, my bad. You don't get to, it's a mistake. And no, it wasn't intentional, but I'm sorry doesn't fix everything. Sometimes there's other consequences. And so in Breonna Taylor's case, you could say that they had training on this and that and the other, but in that moment, there was no accountability for the mistakes. Okay, first off, the first mistake was getting the wrong address and all of that kind of stuff. Someone needs to take accountability for that. And I think in that moment, Sabrina was talking about, the door was dividing both of the perspectives or what have you, but implicit bias. I would be curious if that had been a Caucasian residence and the exact same thing. You got the wrong address, blah, blah, blah. He's got, concealed weapon, authorization, all of that, 12 o'clock. Everything is the same, except knowing when they went to the address, they knew whose address or who they were looking for. And so if they knew it was a non-African American address, the same door, the same all of that, would it have been different? And I'm inclined to think that without removing, that racial bias, your thought process is already different when you get there, right? And where that bias comes from, it's something that's taught, quite frankly. We all have seen the videos on social media where it's the little Black kid and the little white kid, and they're running and they're hugging, and you're my best friend, and we're twins and all of that. Why? Because that's pure. That's what they feel, right? And so it's until they're taught something different, then they see each other different. And so that's that bias. And so whatever the bias is of your household, then naturally that's where you migrate towards until you get to a point and can learn different. And so that's my thought. Moral, legal, yeah, we can split hairs all day, but a life was lost. And if the tables were turned, would the outcomes and the conversations be different?
Thank you, Pamela. In a 2016 survey, only about 1/3 of Black adults said the police in their community did an excellent or good job in using the right amount of force, 33% compared with 75% of whites. Treating racial and ethnic groups equally, 35% versus 75%. And holding officers accountable for misconduct, 31% versus 70%. Do you think this statistic lends to the reason why many Black people are asking to defund the police? And I just want to weigh on this really quickly, and then I'll get to Sabrina. First, I want to jump in and I want to say that both Blacks and whites and the statistics say all Americans think that Black Americans are treated unfairly by police compared to white Americans. Sabrina, what are your thoughts on this question?
Well, again, I'm going to go to, treatment and unfair. I've raised a son and a daughter. I've had those conversations with them. I've had them with myself. Don't be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, let's talk reality. We've already identified there's a reality. There is some perceptions that lead to prejudice and the way people interact and treat us. So yes, I'm going to openly acknowledge that I do feel that those things exist. And I've taught my kids to be careful. Why do we have to have that conversation? Well, we have to have that conversation with our kids as minority parents, because as Ricky mentioned, these things happen. This is our reality. So, the statistics, the numbers, the feelings, the vibes, we can weigh all this out in court and have conversation after conversation. But the reality is, until the culture changes, until there's a shift, until we do better educating our children and our grandchildren to erase, these perceptions, we're still going to be having this discussion, 10 years from now. So yes, these things exist. They are real. They're real within our law enforcement community. And, we're raising awareness by having these conversations. But the reality is, and going back to what Pamela said, we got to revamp the education piece of this. Maybe additional training. Maybe there's something that needs to happen to remove these stigmas, or they're just going to repeat themselves.
Yeah. I do believe that the statistics is definitely the reason why Blacks feel they should defund the police, because let's be honest, a lot of the calls that they're getting are for things that they are just not qualified to handle. Some of these cases are involving people who have mental health issues. They're involving all kinds of different things. And we can't expect a police officer to have all the knowledge to be able to manage every single process. They are still human. They have a line of work that they do. And sometimes there is another professional that should be in that area helping that crisis or whatever that is. And I believe that is the reason why we kind of feel that way. And also, there's sometimes the perception that other officers don't hold each other accountable. Yes, you want to make sure that people have the perception that the officers are there to serve and protect. So you don't want to let everyone know about those bad apples. But when the public does not see you hold those people accountable, it reflects badly on the police department as a whole. So that to me is really the gist of why people are wanting to defund the police, because they just don't have the trust that they're going to do the job they're supposed to do.
Guys, welcome back. I think not sure what we're going to do.
We probably need to go right with Pam. Ricky?
Yes, I think this discussion honestly is very layered, and we can speak for hours on this. And we'll continue this conversation because we can't stop it here. If we want this to make any changes, if we want some resolution, we have to continue the conversation. We have to continue to unpack all of the layers of what's going on. So in order to make sure that our guest gets the best part of the show, the challenge, because she's had it easy all show long, being able to answer all these questions. So we're going to give her a quick challenge.
No one gets out without the hot seat challenge. Sorry,
make it through, Brandy. I thought I was going to escape.
No. We're going to allow you to take the challenge because this is something that every guest does. But it's an easy challenge. You have 5 minutes to answer 10 questions. Now, some of the questions may seem simple, surface level. Some of them are going to involve stereotypes. But what it does is it allows the listener to be able to be empowered and equipped to have uncomfortable conversations with people who they generally do not get the chance to interact with. So instead of having those assumptions, have the conversation to better understand one another. Okay. All right. So Brandy, I will allow you to be our timekeeper. Just let me know when you're ready.
Sorry. All right. I'm ready. All right.
Okay.
There we go.
So I'm going to count it off. Take a deep breath, Pamela. Take a deep breath. All right. In 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Pam, what is your most and least admirable quality?
My most admirable is that I'm a compassionate person. My least is probably I can get long-winded at times.
Okay. Is it a fact or stereotype that most Black women wear weave and fake eyelashes?
That would be fake news. I'm all natural today, but it's okay either way. But yeah, I don't think that that's true.
Okay. Would you take it as a stereotype or racial slur if someone called you an angry Black woman? Why or why not?
I would, because being angry has nothing to do with my ethnicity. If I'm angry in the situation, it's because I'm angry in the situation. So race really doesn't play a role, because that is truly stereotypical, because you cannot paint everyone with a broad brush in any circumstance.
Absolutely. Do you think Black people deserve reparations for the suffering they endure in the U.S.?
Oh, absolutely, I do. It's been a long time coming. It might be a long time before we see it, but it's righting a wrong.
Okay. If you had the opportunity to ask the president one personal question, what would it be?
The current president. Exit stage left.
Okay. When was the first time you heard about white privilege, and what impact did it have on you?
Oh my gosh, I think it probably was in my childhood, but it was certainly out of the context of what it is today. I'm a military brat, and so our lifestyle is a little different, because you're kind of forced to embrace diversity to some degree. Not to say that racism and all that doesn't exist in our world, but you're in this school or that school or this country or that country based on your parents' assignment or what have you. So.
Okay. And what books are you reading or have you read that have helped you understand racial injustice among Black people?
One is The True Cost of Being African American. It just, wow, it's so impactful. And to think, you would assume that it was written by a Black person, but actually it was written by a white person, but it's profound.
Wow. If you gave a keynote presentation to the Fraternal Order of Police, what would the topic be and why?
The topic would be seeing people, as human beings, and not beyond their circumstance or situation. Because I think if you go into any situation with an open mind, then you're open to the possibilities. But when you go in it with, I already believe this is the fact, then you can't even hear other conversations or perceive it any other way.
Absolutely. What would you consider the most uncomfortable conversation topic to have with white women?
With white women, that there is a difference in being an African American woman on so many different levels. And if they don't come to the table with that open mind to receive what the experience is in our skin, then it's a closed conversation.
Absolutely. And if you had the opportunity to give advice to candidate Kamala Harris on helping Black women, what would be that advice?
Really, I would say empowerment, right? And embracing who you are and bringing your whole self to all that you do, right? But that whole self needs to be the best version of your whole self.
Absolutely. All right. So you passed the challenge. You were able to answer all the questions within 5 minutes. So.
Oh, wow.
Yes, we have 1 minute left, actually.
Perfect.
One to spare. Miss Long-winded.
I try to be cognizant. I know that about know thyself, right? That's the first rule. And so, I'm a work in progress.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pamela, for doing that challenge, and thank you for being a guest on the show.
Oh, thank you.
People out there, I just want you to know she is an amazing speaker. I've seen her in person, giving an empowering speech to the audience. So definitely book her, get her for financial coaching, get her book so you can be empowered to be better physically, mentally, spiritually, and financially. Pam, can you just give the listeners one more time how they can connect with you, your website and your social media?
So all my social media handles are Bonafide, or either B5 Reaffirm, which is the new division of the company. The website for Bonafide is bonafidecc.com. And remember, the Bonafide is spelled different, BONA, the number 5, DCC.com, or B5 Reaffirm. My number, if you want to call me or text me, 813-495-8568. And I look forward to hearing from each and every one of you. Thank you guys again for allowing me to be a guest. I love what you're doing. These difficult conversations, these uncomfortable conversations are necessary conversations. And so I applaud you guys for taking the stance and taking the time to bring this to the people.
All right. Thank you so much. And we will take a quick sponsor break.
You can follow our hosts on Facebook. Search Trendsetter Mentor Group and join. Email your uncomfortable conversation questions to npartners@yahoo.com. We will address your questions on next week's show. Let's have that conversation.
Hey guys, welcome back. I do want to go ahead and cover our Love It or Leave It email for the day before we have to go. Love It or Leave It is powered by Emerging Excellence LLC, a brand focused on re-engineering the mindsets of millennial professionals. Love It or Leave It works like this. Each week, we read emails from our listeners that need advice from our conversation coaches, Sabrina and Ricky. Aaron and I will read the email, and Sabrina and Ricky will share their perspective on the question and make a recommendation if they would love the conversation or if they would leave it. All right. So our first email is from Phoenix, Illinois. I don't know if that's an error or if there's actually a Phoenix, Illinois, but we're going to roll with it. I have been furloughed from my job since June, and my wife works from home. We argue so much, and it is becoming an issue with our children homeschooling. The teachers overhear our conversations because we live in an apartment, and it is very embarrassing. We need a marriage counselor, but I am reluctant to bring it up to my wife because she is a certified life coach. Should I have this conversation with someone more qualified, or should I have this conversation with my wife? Let's go to Sabrina and get your question.
Well, I tell you, I'm a certified life coach. That's a heavy question. It's like, you dare to go talk to somebody else before you talk to me? Are you crazy? So I think, as with any relationship, regardless of your profession, I think you should have that conversation first. Now, I don't feel that the wife, being a life coach, should be the one to actually address the situation. It's like a doctor can't doctor himself. It has to be presented in a method of, we need help. And I know you've got these certain skills and tools, but we need to get someone objective. And the best thing is for us, you have that conversation to go seek help together, because you can't doctor yourself. A lawyer can't represent himself. I think there was a quote that says, a man who has an attorney who has himself for a lawyer is a fool. I remember reading that somewhere. So an attorney shouldn't. You're a fool. So the same would be here. So I think that I would have a conversation with my wife or spouse, if the roles are reversed, gender, but with the understanding that we together should go get outside help.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sabrina. The thing is, as a certified life coach as well, I understand that there's limitations to my expertise. And even if I was an expert in that area, it doesn't mean that I don't have blind spots. It doesn't mean that I necessarily know everything about myself, because we are all works in progress. So I would say to have the conversation with the wife first. And the reason I say that is because as a life coach, you should understand that sometimes you need outside perspective, someone who is not directly attached to your situation, to be able to be a neutral party. And if you cannot get help from someone else, how are you going to be able to help other people? How are you going to be able to pour into somebody else's life if you don't allow others to do that? You have to be coachable to be able to coach others. So in this scenario, I say it may be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. And I believe that overall, the wife will appreciate it if the conversation was brought directly to her before going to an outside source. And it will make you even stronger that you even took the time to want to do something of that nature, because sometimes people don't want to involve other people into their affairs. So I think it will strengthen their relationship more than anything.
Great answer, guys. I think both of you would love the conversation. I would also love the conversation. I think it's definitely, one of those things that it's always easier to see the situation if you're on the outside of it, and not actually in the moment yourself and in the situation. So that's definitely a conversation that, he needs to have with his wife, and so that they can get what they need outside of the house and get things resolved so that it's not affecting their children during their school and everything and making it look bad. That's probably not a situation the teachers want to overhear in the background with the other students around. So today we discussed a heavy topic. We discussed when it's okay to use lethal force with police officers. And I know that this topic has a lot of layers. It's something that we may revisit in the future. I know that we ran out of time with our guest Pamela today, but I do want to take time and thank her, if she's still listening, for being a guest on our show and being a good sport with the Uncomfortable Question Challenge. I know that's a little difficult for our guest. I'd
like to weigh in on something, Brandy, for a minute before we end.
Sure, absolutely.
I'd like to get Erin's comment on that scenario we just mentioned. You know, prior to the show, she was saying she had so many feelings and vibes about things. We got to have a minute. I'd like to hear her perspective on that scenario. You're muted.
You're muted, Erin.
Oh, what happened there?
Can you hear me?
Now, yes.
There you are.
That was weird.
Yeah.
I was like, it doesn't say mute on my end. Are you talking about the love it or leave it?
Yes, the question that Brandy just asked about the life coach.
I would absolutely have the conversation with my wife. And I think the biggest thing is people avoid uncomfortable conversations because there's a fear that exists inside them. They tell themselves a story that maybe doesn't exist about what might happen if they confront the elephant in the room. They confront the situation that's making them uncomfortable that they don't want to talk about. So I do believe that the husband should definitely, let the wife know, I want to have a conversation with you when we can both be civil and we can do it in the privacy of our own home without anybody being around. And it's just between the two of us. We need to talk about some things because it's putting a lot of stress on the children and myself. And I would imagine it's putting stress on you. So I would definitely have the conversation with the wife. And then from there, seek professional help if something can't get resolved within the conversation. If you can't communicate, because communication in any relationship is the most important thing.
Wow. Phenomenal. I thought her perspective would have been good because she wrote the book Beating the Badass and she's been in some uncomfortable situations and she actually coaches people. So I kind of thought that it would be good to hear that perspective. Brandy, back to you, girl.
Absolutely. Thank you all for your perspectives today with all of these very, very deep and multi-layer conversations that we've had. I think that we had a great show today and we covered a lot of very important, uncomfortable conversations. I want to thank everyone for viewing our show today with us and taking the time to find out how we can have more of these uncomfortable conversations and have them not be so uncomfortable next time. I want to thank you and everyone have a great day and have a great week.
Bye, everybody. See you next week.
You can follow our hosts on Facebook. Search Trendsetter Mentor Group and join. Email your uncomfortable conversation questions to npartners@yahoo.com. We will address your questions on next week's show. Let's have that conversation.